Good evening, Uganda. You're listening to 933 KFM. This is the Thursday edition of the Hot Seat. Standing in for Patrick Kamara is me, Kwezi Tabaro. Today we have a special session in studio. What should have been our Wednesday panel on the economy is convening this Thursday because of the budget that was read today afternoon at the Kololo ceremonial grounds. The theme for this year's budget, or rather for the upcoming financial year 2024-2025, is full monetization of Uganda's economy through commercial agriculture, industrialization, expanding and broadening services, digital transformation and market access. And this was delivered by the Honorable Matia Kasaija, who is the Minister of Finance, on behalf of the President. I understand I have one of my regular panelists, Senior Presidential Advisor Moses Byaruhanga, on the line. Moses, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Kwezi.
Yes, I expected you in studio, but I'm told there was a terrible jam since the President's speech ended only 30 minutes ago.
Yes.
As you try to make your way to studio, maybe we can start this conversation. First of all, the theme of this upcoming financial year is quite a mouthful. Could you try to summarize for my dear listeners what the emphasis in both the Minister of Finance and the President's speeches have been today?
The emphasis on wealth creation, basically growing the economy. The target is to grow it 10 times in the next 10, 15 years. Grow the economy from 55 billion USD, about 500 billion USD in 10, 15 years. But working backwards, you have to increase wealth creation. The President was emphasizing that there are 4 sectors, and the Minister of Finance also talked about them: commercial agriculture, manufacturing, services, and ICT. If each and every Ugandan could find a way of being in one of the 4, would even create a lot of jobs for those who are talking about jobs, and we might create more jobs than Ugandan population has, so that we might able to bring in more people from outside. Like if you go to these European countries, they have more workers. Okay, almost all their people are employed. But then they get workers from outside. These people go for GAO. They end up working there because the job opportunities are there. All the nationals have been employed, and then you get foreigners also coming to work there. So the target of the budget and both speeches by the Minister and the President is how to grow the economy of Uganda by engaging in wealth creation.
Moses, I'm looking through the budget speech. Quite a lot of figures that I wanted you to add context to, especially sticking on the issue of employment. The minister says that, for example, through Emyoga in the past year alone, we've created 378,640 new direct jobs. This is about 40,000 additional new jobs compared to those last year. And then there's an interesting statistic on PDM, which is your pet subject, that close to 1.2 million households have received PDM funds worth 1.12 trillion, and this is estimated to have created 2.5 million jobs. The figures there look too rosy to be true. And where for Emyoga you use definite figures, I wonder why for PDM you're saying estimated 2.5 million jobs. Couldn't you find the right statistics for that?
Because you are giving it for Emyoga, somebody is getting, say, 1 million, investing in poultry. So for the Emyoga, it's the circles. The circles have a membership.
Yes.
So you know how many people are benefited.
So the numbers are definite.
Are definite.
Yes.
But for PDM, I borrow 1 million. I go and start a poultry project. I buy 4 goats. How many I'm employed? So the people employed, that's why you're using estimate. At least that is like one household is employing another 2 people.
So that means these are 2.5 million new jobs created that didn't exist before PDM?
You see, when you look at it, because PDM is targeting people who are not in the money economy, that's 9%. So many of them, they were there working for themselves. And when they say getting into a form of employment where they're going to earn, and is different from when they're working for themselves.
But Moses, you know the size of Uganda's economy. The bulk of our population are, in fact, children, so they are not even eligible to work. Do you think you can have 2.5 million jobs created in this economy, and you don't even feel it?
You see, the estimate of the 3.9 million, 39% is about 3.5 million households in the country. So if you are going to talk about a household having about 5 people, you multiply 3.5 times 5. You're talking about 15 million people in terms of human beings, not households. So creating 2.5 million jobs out of the 15 million people is not a big challenge. Yeah.
Interesting. I also see here the figure for youth projects, about 23,000 projects that have benefited close to 270,000 youths around the Youth Livelihood Program. Why these segmented interventions? Why not have a one-size-fits-all approach? Because there's a bit of money for the youth, a bit of money for the women, a bit of money for urban areas and all.
Those programs, like youth and women programs, when we started the PDM, we stopped new funding, but the existing funds were there kept on revolving. So we're not adding in new money in the budget for them. As you have seen, there's no new money in the budget.
But wouldn't we stand a chance of having a much bigger impact if our punch was stronger? For example, consolidating all those monies into...
That's what we did. In the past, we would put money in the budget like 50 billion for youth. Now we have not put it there, but the other one was a revolving fund. So there's no way you could cut out a revolving fund because people already had that money. You couldn't get it from their pockets and bring it back to the consolidated fund.
So in essence, you're saying those who are benefiting from the Youth Livelihood Program might as well benefit from PDM and OWC?
No, you see, 30% of PDM goes to the youth, 30% goes to women. So now the youth are catered for under PDM. The youth are already catered for under PDM. But we are not starting new youth projects, youth programs, because we are not finding youth program afresh. What we are continuing is what you are talking about is the continuation. Is the continuation of what was already going on. Yeah, because the new youth programs are under PDM. 30% of the PDM money is supposed to go to youth. So for each parish, you can say out of 100 million, 30 million, which is about 30%, is supposed to go to the youth. So that's why we are not putting in new money for youth programs. But the YLP, which was there before, as a borrowing fund, because that money it was not supposed to come back to government. Even under both the Myoga and the PDM, that money does not come back to government. It stays there as a revolving fund. So what Mr. Mutsaja was talking about, the youth fund, is the one which was there before.
Okay, so no new money is being spent on that.
On the youth program, yeah.
I want us to talk about economic performance. The minister also says that for once in the last 4 years, Uganda's economy has now fully recovered from various internal and external shocks that had impacted our performance over the last 4 years, and that the GDP is projected to grow by 6% in the current financial year. Mr. Moses Byaruhanga, the Ugandans I speak to on the streets of Kampala or in any of our major towns don't seem to agree with this reality as presented by Honorable Kasaija.
Like how?
That the economy today is back to where it was just before COVID in 2020.
Yeah, sure.
There are many businesses that closed that have never recovered.
The minister said the economy has recovered from the shocks of COVID. You see, during COVID, whenever we were all in the houses, not doing the lockdown. People were not operating. That was lifted. Many economies suffered the exchange rate, the fluctuation in the exchange rate. You remember the cost of shipment went up. Getting a container from China to Mombasa went up at about $5,000, which has now come back to about $2,200 thereabouts. Those are the things that you are referring to. We were constricting the economy, but now most things are as free as they were.
Well, the reality for many traders in Chikubo, those who closed their shops in 2020 as soon as we went into lockdown, many of them feel they've not gone back to that level of business that they had just before we went into lockdown. So one wonders what measures or what parameters the minister is using here.
But even before lockdown, if you went to the Chikubo today, it is as full as it was, even more fuller than it was before. If you look at Kampala, new buildings are coming up with new shops. If wherever I go, I see a new supermarket, a new apartments, new what is creating that? They're not coming from heaven. You go on any road you go in, as you get out of Kampala, you'll find new buildings being created, new supermarkets there, new apartments go around the country. So what is happening? So that doesn't mean the economy is growing. You're having new buildings coming up. That's the growth in the economy.
I think the question, Moses, is the economy growing because of specific government interventions, or it's growing anyway because the rising tide is lifting many economic boats? For example, I looked at the figures in the budget. Some of the best performing sectors in the previous financial year that we're closing are tourism and remittances. I think each of them bringing in close to $1.1 billion. Government of Uganda largely has no control over these. We don't control how many tourists come into Uganda, neither do we really control how many Ugandans who have left because of the economic situation at home and went abroad, how much they remit at home.
Crazy. If there was insecurity in the country, you don't have any tourists coming in. And security is created by government. So you cannot say tourists are coming on their own, there's no government contribution. Government contribution is in ensuring there's peace and security in the country for those tourist numbers grow.
But there's so many countries in the world where that is it's taken for granted almost.
No, well, but we at least for Uganda, we still take it for granted. Because at one time we had insecurity, we had no tourism. Tourism has grown because of security coming back to Uganda today. If you go to Congo is our neighbor here, DRC, because of what's happening there. Go to South Sudan, go to the North Sudan, Khartoum. I don't think they will be getting the same number of tourists they were getting before this security took place in those countries.
Moses, don't you think you're doing a disservice to your boss who has been president for the last 40 years by comparing Uganda under Museveni to countries that are in a very unfortunate situation like South Sudan and the DRC?
You are the one who's making it a service. Because you are saying people are just coming on their own. I'm telling you, they are coming because there is security in the country. Is security provided by government? Is it private?
No.
It's not. It's security, and there's been a lot of investment in security in this country.
Yes, Moses. What I'm saying is
we have our forces in the Congo trying to stop ADF from stabilizing us, and that gives the security to tourists to come to Uganda.
Moses, what I'm saying is you're the very person who has said that your ultimate aim is to grow this economy tenfold. Is it tenfold in the next 10 years or the next 5 years? So certainly if we're to grow this economy tenfold, government of Uganda will have to go beyond just saying we are receiving these many tourists just because we are providing security, and say we are making these significant investments either in our service industry or in our human resource to make sure that we attract more tourists so we can earn more tourism dollars. Because essentially what we are earning, if I'm to be fair, what we are earning is because Uganda is gifted by nature and we happen to be a secure country. That's why people are coming here.
You see, the President and Mr. Finance both talked about putting more funds. For the PDA. See, PDA, if you read my article in today's New Vision, you see, when we put that $1 trillion every year in PDA, people receive money, go and invest. When they earn money, they consume. By consuming industrial manufactured products, even some imported products, the economy is growing. And that's deliberate. The President and Mr. Finance were talking about putting funds in UDP, putting funds for the SME fund. In fact, Mr. Finance said that from the 100 billion which was put in the SME fund, less has been borrowed, and saying they want to revisit the criteria so that maybe they make less restrictions so that more people can access that fund for the economy.
Moses, I want you to hold your point there and we take a commercial break. But before we go into the commercial break, when we come back, we'll discuss Honorable Matia Kasaija's quip here as quoted by NTV. He says in the next few days, I will release the remaining 529 billion of PDM funds for this financial year directly into the accounts of PDM SACCOs, and that each PDM SACCO will continue to receive Uganda shillings 100 million. This is according to Honorable Matia Kasaija, who is the finance minister. So if you're a PDM fund or SACCO outside there, certainly know that some money is on its way. We'll take a short commercial break, and when we come back, more of this discussion.
The hottest debate on all relevant topics, live on KFM's Hot Seat tonight. KFM's Hot Seat covers all the relevant topics every weekday, 7 to 8 p.m. KFM's Hot Seat. Hot Seat. Hear the real story behind the story. Coming right at you. Only on 933 KFM.
Welcome back from the break. You're listening to 933 KFM. This is the Thursday edition of the Hot Seat. Standing in for Patrick Kamara is me, Kwezi, Tabaro. And on this special edition of our discussion, we're discussing the recently passed budget and the budget speech that was made by the Honorable Matia Kasaija. My producer tells me that I have on the line Mr. David Walakira, who is the Executive Director of the Center for Budget Policy. Mr. Walakira, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Good evening.
Good evening, please.
What did you make of the budget speech by Honorable Matia Kasaija? And the budget generally?
Yes. The budget that was read to by the Minister for Finance on behalf of the President is one that we had already got a sneak peek of after Parliament approved it a few weeks back.
Yes.
And for the first time for me, I was really quite excited that the Minister was categorical on a few things.
Like?
One, about our resource envelope. He has told Ugandans, he has told us the Ugandans, that we have an appropriated budget worth 37 trillion shillings. Now, for the Ugandan listening, possibly we sometimes might don't get the full meaning of what appropriation means. We have two kinds of expenses. We have an appropriated expense and we have a statutory expense. Statutory expenses are not appropriated by a parliament because they are obligations by the Republic of Uganda, and they take first call on our money.
So these are, to use the layman's language, these are debts
largely
owed by the government of Uganda.
Yes, largely debts and interest obligations.
Yes.
And a few other payments in there to in regard the presidency. Some of them are statutory, like the salaries of the president, of the judges, and things of the sort.
So this is not money that is coming to me and you through social services like roads and water, security.
That is now that's what we call the appropriated budget now.
Yes.
And that is 37 trillion shillings.
What percentage is that of our budget?
That is 37 out of 72, slightly above 50%.
Slightly under 50%. It's
around there.
Yes. Interesting.
You know? So that for me, it is slightly above 50%.
Oh, you say 37 of 72?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, slightly above 50.
Slightly above 50, yes. So that for me speaks volumes, and it begins to situate our expectations as a people. And also what that does is that it helps us understand that, for example, out of about 186 trillion shillings, what's the size of the economy of the Republic of Uganda, it's only about 36 is contributed by government, So for me, it's always a discussion of how else do we pay attention to the other contributors of our general growth question. There is the question of the external factors, because we import and we export. There's a question of consumption, okay, which is also usually a function of our spending ability, and there is a question of saving that affects the investment. So for me, those come through, and government has spoken to a few ways in which they can enable some of those enabling environments. And in that discussion, for me, the sticky ones that didn't augur well was the fact that, for example, we have the Uganda Development Bank, whose role is to give a bit of high-level money for the high-level projected investors. But also in the same breath, you have the same budget that is giving hand-picked, cherry-picked investors money directly as an appropriation, you know? And there we got a highlight of the COVIDX investor, a highlight of another researcher who is researching on human vaccines, and then there are Chak Sugar Factory investor. And
what do you find wrong with those appropriations?
It's not so much of wrong than the mode of delivering them. When you personalize an incentive, not through a structure that you've put up to deal with those incentives, for me, I find that a bit irregular. We have the Uganda Development Corporation, okay, whose job is exactly to give money to such kind of investors.
Not to give money, I think to invest. I think Ugandans understand giving money differently.
Yes. To lend money at concessional rates to such investors.
Yes.
Okay? So the UDC being there and being recapitalized, okay? But at the same time, you have a parallel mode of giving out money, you know?
Mr. Walakira, I wanted to shift slightly to actual figures that have a direct bearing on the taxpayer, me and you. According to the finance minister, this financial year that is ending, government of Uganda through URA was able to collect, or has been able to collect as of today, about 27.7 trillion against a target of 29.67 trillion, and which leaves a revenue shortfall of 1.9 trillion, which they hope that URA will try to reduce, but it's unlikely we will hit our target. We haven't met our domestic revenue target, but we have increased our projected revenue collection for the incoming financial year to about 32 trillion. So that means more burden on you and I, the taxpayer, and we're going to see a lot more emails and letters from URA.
So maybe a bit of the breakdown of our 31 trillion shilling total domestic revenue target.
It's closer to 32.
There is about 2.5 or so trillion shillings that is coming from non-tax revenue, and again URA has a burden that is close to 30 trillion, but it's like 29.8. So in terms of tax revenue target, because for domestic revenue you have both tax and non-tax.
Yes.
For the tax revenue target, there hasn't been a much shift, you know,
from what we had last year.
Yes, from what we had last year, and I think for me that was quite wise. I think they really observed and saw what the performance is now, and said, okay, maybe we can possibly want to hold it within the 29 trillion range. And you see, on the other side of the tax collection, it's only excise duty that had a possible tweak in the rate. Okay, and this is on fuel, and that is about 100 for both fuel and diesel. Yeah. So the Parliament dropped the proposal to have a 500 shilling tax on kerosene. Yes. It was also proposed earlier. So we now have only 100 shillings. Okay, and then we also have a few monies coming off of liquor. You know, for those that are in the whiskey space, the bottle is going to get a bit more expensive. The other provisions in the tax code have been mostly administrative. They've been incentives, you know, just to a bit of encourage that level of investment to come through. That then we want to see coming through that whole discussion of the 500 trillion mark.
The tenfold GDP increment.
Yes.
So, Mr. Walakira, in essence, what you're telling my listeners is that our tax burden remains more or less the same as it was last year. So don't expect any tax increases, don't expect any new taxes in this new financial year.
And that is one of, and for me, that is one of the good things again that is beginning to come through in our budget speeches. There is a realization of it's not so much so about the increasing taxes, but I think I see a clear effort of government trying to emphasize the improvement of the collection So you see money going through to give your extra human resources, to give them extra equipment, to give them extra facilities generally, to collect more money. Okay? So the question of widening the tax base, I think, has sunk. And we really are not seeing any much of a bit of distortion in the rates. And I see a lot of focus on the collection, but also a bit of effort on efficiencies in allocations, really. Yeah. So there's quite a bit that is coming through the whole other discussion of fiscal consolidation. Basically, realizing that what we have is what you're going to have to spend.
So in essence, yes,
this has come through in the reduction of the projected fiscal deficit that we had for this financial year that is ending. You know, and for me that speaks a bit of house cleaning on the side of government's planned expenditure.
Okay, so I think you really hit the topic on the head. That this, you would say, is a very considerate budget, meaning not much of a tax burden, at least to the existing taxpayers. But Ugandans have also increasingly pushed government to walk the talk when it comes to government expenditure, especially what they consider either unnecessary or discretionary expenditure. So in much the same way that government is asking us to tighten our belts in these difficult economic times, don't you think that Ugandans would also want to see a government that is more frugal, where there is less waste?
I think for me, possibly before we touch a bit of frugality, we need to be able to strike the balance here. It can't be the same group of us that expect all the nice things done, all the roads, want all the power evacuated from wherever it is. And I actually had an exciting bit that in Buyende, there is plans to have an 8,700 megawatt nuclear power plant.
Yes,
that is also the really, I think, past which is something that we need to be watching and see how that unfolds. I see for me a bigger risk on how government plans to finance all those aspirations and promises that they are giving us. Part of the financing mechanism for that is domestic borrowing. There is a risk that, again, the minister has acknowledged the proportion of the debt that is maturing, okay, in the short term for us to pay back for the bonds and bills is now at 40% by the end of 2024 to 2025.
40% of what? Of our collections?
Yes. Against now the public debt management framework had allowed us up to 20%. And what's happening now, from the draft budget that was presented to Parliament way back in April, government has doubled the domestic borrowing from about 4 to now 8-point-something trillion shillings. That means that I think for me, we get to a point where we need to balance the ask vis-a-vis how we collect. Of course, we all know that when government borrows a lot from the domestic market,
it's tight for the private sector.
Yes, gets a bit tighter. So we need to expect, for me, in the financial 24-25 higher lending rates, because those that have the money are going to want to rationalize.
Mr. Walakira, before I let you go, if you were to score this budget out of 10, what would be your score?
If I were to score it based on the conclusion of the minister, I will tell you the minister has nailed it. We've had a characterization, of this budget, and the minister directly spoke to the investor, spoke to the youth, spoke to the mother educating a child. I really quickly went back and saw what happened for all the budget speeches, including the one of last year. There was never such kind of characterizations of these allocations to speak to the needs and aspirations of the various individuals. I think for me, it's generally a well-packaged message. Albeit a few things that obviously are set to possibly get claimed in the execution.
All right, thank you, David. You're listening there to David Walakira, Executive Director of the Center for Budget Policy. We're still continuing with this discussion. We'll take a short commercial break, and when we come back, more with Moses Byaruhanga.
KFM's Hot Seat. It's hot, it's live, provocative, and digs deep into the issues. It's KFM's Hot Seat.
933, 933. KFM.
Endless debate on all relevant topics live on KFM's Hot Seat tonight. KFM's Hot Seat covers all the relevant topics every weekday, 7 to 8 p.m.
Welcome back from the break. You're listening to 933 KFM. Standing in for Patrick Kamara is me, Kwezi, Tabaro, on this special Thursday edition of the Hot Seat, where we are discussing the budget speech by the Honorable Matia Kasaija, who is Minister for Finance. I have on the line Mr. Moses Byaruhanga, Senior Presidential Advisor on Political Affairs. Moses, can you hear me?
I hear you, Patrick. Kwezi.
Yes, it's Kwezi in studio, not Patrick. But I'm reading here a tweet by the Daily Monitor quoting President Yoweri Museveni verbatim, saying that oil money will never be used for consumption as long as the NRM government is in charge. It will only be used for infrastructure and science development. And that these sectors will be funded through oil money, and we shall not borrow for them. We shall not use, this is according to President Yoweri Museveni, the money from oil to import what he calls takataka, like perfumes and whiskey. Moses, I reckon I have heard President Yoweri Museveni say this so many times. I think every budget speech in the last 10 years, he has talked about oil money coming and what it's going to be used for. Is this the last budget speech that we talk about oil money, and maybe in the next one we'll actually be talking about how oil money has been allocated?
Well, the oil money is, we expect the oil in 2026. So basically, you can budget for it 27, 26, 27. We expect the oil to be out in 2026. So basically, we have one more year before we think of oil money flowing in.
But your government does not have such an excellent record when it comes to planning and following through with plans or frugality. So, yes, these are very encouraging statements from President Yoweri Museveni that oil money will not be used for wasteful expenses. But we know at some point we had, or we still have, something called the oil fund, which we've raided every now and then with indiscipline.
For infrastructure. For instance, we raided the oil fund to do oil roads. The oil roads were necessary because partly now we're taking rigs and so forth going to that area. They require better constructed roads. Most of the old roads in the Munyoro region, sub-region now are all tarmac. So that money was used progressively for infrastructure.
So you think we will follow through and that this money will actually be put in sectors that have a return on investment?
Especially you mentioned the SGR. They said we should be able to use that money to fund the SGR. And the SGR will require a lot of money, so definitely yes.
Moses, I want us to broaden the conversation and look at Uganda not just in isolation, but I know the many other East African countries also read their budgets at around the same time. Uganda is now about the third or fourth biggest economy in the East African community. But when it comes to actual changes in the lives of ordinary citizens, I don't see in many ways how different Kenyans or Tanzanians or Ugandans are from one another, much as these economies have been growing for the last 15 or 20 years. Isn't it time that we now measure economic progress, not just in the percentages of GDP growth, but in the meaningful change in the lives of people?
Yes, and if you look at the structure of the Ugandan economy, when, for instance, you talk about coffee, you talk about tea, you talk about those crops grown by the peasants, and most of them are grown at peasant level. The coffee in Uganda, we don't have big plantations. There are very, very few. So these Germans in Murende and a few others who they have more than 100 acres. These days, people are planting coffee at the big time, the middle class. But all along, it has been mainly peasant crop. They're mostly mainly for tea as well. So when this coffee money goes into the population, goes into the country, it basically goes to the rural people and those who plant the coffee. That makes a difference between Uganda and our neighbors, like Kenya, for instance. Most of the coffee from Kenya is from plantation farms, big farms, and the tea from Kenya. But so the money goes few. Here in Uganda, it goes so many. And if you look at the day-to-day life of a Kenyan and life of Uganda in rural areas, most likely you'll find in Uganda and in rural areas better off than in the rural area. Yeah.
But beyond these measures, I know the emphasis the president has put on sectors like coffee and all that. But we see the reverse in tea, where Ugandans actually now uprooting their tea plantations, especially in western Uganda, in Toro.
Well, the challenge is still because of exporting tea in a raw form. That's why we have been always emphasizing value addition. But definitely, tea is still a low value crop. The president has been very clear that the small landholders not engage in low value crops. Tea is a low value crop. There's no doubt about it. But those who are uprooting are the people with small holders, are not the big landholders. So it's the same with tobacco, cotton. So that's why the emphasis the president has been emphasizing fruit trees, mangoes, citrus, and coffee for the small landholders and other projects like livestock.
Moses, walk my listeners through what you plan to do to grow this economy tenfold, because President Yoweri Museveni has been here since 1986. I don't know how many fold our GDP has grown in the last 38 years. What magic...
years it has grown from 1.5 billion to 55 billion. If you want to say how many fold...
Are those nominal dollars or...
The nominal.
So
from 1.5 billion in 1986 to 55 billion today.
So about 25-fold.
That's about 25-fold. So growing it tenfold is wouldn't be surprised.
25-fold in 40 years, and you want to grow it tenfold in the next 5 or 10?
Yeah. You say 10, 15 years. 10, 15. So grow it tenfold.
Walk us through those steps. How are we going to do it? Yes, go ahead.
In those years, we shall have the oil money already coming in. We need those, we expect in about 2 years, by 2026, as I said earlier.
Many Ugandans would say you've already borrowed significantly against those oil windfalls.
We haven't borrowed against oil. We haven't. We have not.
So how are we going to pay back the debt we've contracted, for example, for the building of the airport in Hoima, the building of the pipeline, the building of the central processing facilities, and the oil roads?
No. We shall pay, the royalty, those ones we are co-invested. They will make my own money. The pipeline, we are building it with Tanzania and the oil companies. So it will make its own money and bring it to the treasury. The royalties are from the selling of the oil.
Yes.
So the one for the construction will be able to pay itself because it will be charging.
But all that is money off.
The oil is going to win.
Yes.
The pipeline will be charging the oil going to win. So we'll be earning from the royalties at the same time earning from the pipeline itself.
Yes, but all this is money that is tied to our oil resources. This is not new money that's going to come from a different sector in Uganda. And I'm saying that isn't it too risky for the country to rely on one commodity, oil, to sort all our problems? We want to use it to build infrastructure. We want to use it to offset the debt we've acquired to build some of the oil infrastructure. There's only so much we can do.
Get me right, Mr. President.
Yes, please.
I say the pipeline will pay for itself. It's like a road toll.
Yes.
You pass because the oil going to the pipeline will be the pipeline company will charge
transit fees
have gone through it, and that money goes to the shareholders, which is Uganda, Tanzania, and the
oil companies.
The oil companies, yeah. So it's making money on its own.
Okay. So you say that's one potential source, oil.
The royalties are the one who comes from the sale of the oil, not the transport. This is transporting it.
Okay.
It's different from the royalties from the oil itself.
Okay.
Besides, then we will have our own refinery in Uganda, which refinery will now stop us from the about $2 billion we spend on importing of oil products. So that also helps to grow the economy, that when we're using our own oil internally, the oil petroleum products. So we will be exporting the crude, but at the same time having the petroleum products made locally.
Moses, isn't this a very simplistic way of looking at it? Because I know many countries that have refineries that still import oil. In fact, if you use examples of Nigeria has refineries, but it's much cheaper for it to import oil than to refine its own oil.
Nigeria doesn't have refineries. The first refinery, we are not talking of
Dangote's refinery
in Nigeria.
But there have been refineries in Nigeria for the last 30 years.
Dangote is the first person to distributed by in Nigeria. All these donkey years, Nigeria has been exporting crude oil and importing refined products. Now, that's the mistake Uganda said you're not going to do. It was a big battle with the oil companies. That's why there has been a lot of delays. For them, they were saying, let's export everything. Uganda said no. For internal, we must have our own refinery. That took a lot of the discussions with the oil companies. So Uganda will be among the first African countries to refine its own oil and serve it better.
Moses, so on that one, you certainly agree with your boss, President Yoweri Museveni, that oil will be a game changer. But that's just one resource. So which are the other areas of growth that we are looking at that will grow our economy tenfold?
For instance, you mentioned the tourism sector is growing. If you listen to the Honourable Minister, he was talking of investment is increasing money for promotion of Uganda, marketing Uganda, doing a lot of tourism, investing in tourism infrastructure like tourism road. Of course, security is part of tourism and so forth. We are talking about the PDM. We're talking about value addition in coffee. The minister mentioned the money we have spent on the local coffee roasters and so forth. This year he has put 75 billion in the coming year to increase the local capacity companies which are doing roasting and grinding of coffee, so that we emphasize on value addition and add more. Through the money putting in UDB and these other small sectors, so that these people have cheaper money for those investing in services and manufacturing. Want them to access cheaper money through UDB so that they can grow the economy by creating jobs and so forth.
This is the last budget, I think, before we head into election year, and I think the fourth one in this current term, if I'm not mistaken. What would be your second last? What would be your assessment of budget performance over these last three or so budget cycles? Do you think that the NRM government is on track to meet its commitments in the manifesto to Ugandans?
We are affected. We are doing a review. We are affected because by COVID. So when we were doing the manifesto, we were in a COVID time, so we didn't know how long the COVID situation would take. Definitely, it has some toll on how much we can implement, but definitely we have tried our best. We're doing an assessment, so maybe in the near future I'll be able to tell you, are we able to do all everything we put in the manifesto, or are we run short of some of them as a result of the constraints we went through during the days caused by the COVID pandemic. The COVID.
Yes. Are you confident that based on your government's performance over these last 3 or 4 years that President Museveni is in a strong position to command another mandate in 2026? Or the NRM government for that matter?
Look at the health sector. If you listen to the speech very carefully.
Yes.
So I don't have the number of cars.
The number of ambulances, I think, for me is what stood out.
Well, the ambulances, but also the
116.
About over 200 and 200 is health center tools which have been upgraded to health center fees. The secondary schools which have been constructed and more being constructed. Those are impacting on the population. There's no doubt about it. And these are the investments we are making. So in the social sector, the water, the towns which have been receiving water and so forth, the minister mentioned them, and the more investments are coming up. So if you look at the social sector, the health, water, education, a lot has been achieved in the past 1 year, and we are putting more money in those sectors to grow them, besides the money-making sectors like PDM, Emioga, and so forth.
So you're confident that your government is in a strong position to convince Ugandans to be rewarded come 2026?
Definitely. You see, look at, for instance, if you want me to be political, look at the 1 trillion going out to the household.
Through PDM.
Every year you have 1 million households. So far, in the last financial year, 1 million households received. By close of June, we shall have another 1 million having received, those are 2 million households. In the next financial year, we'll also have another 1 million. Now, those are people who have benefited from this PDM fund. And these are just a household, which households are like 5 members. So you do your politics.
About 5 million Ugandans.
Yeah.
Moses, let's talk about...
So why would they not appreciate the government, which has made them access the money economy?
Maybe I should give you a reason why they shouldn't appreciate government, Moses. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, corruption. 3 of your NRM parliamentarians are in the dock currently over alleged corruption. We'll not go into the details. That matter is now before the courts.
Yeah.
But many Ugandans expected President Yoweri Museveni, as he had done in the State of the Nation address, to give another hint on his ongoing war against corruption. Sadly, to their disappointment...
He took a lot of time to talk about it. Maybe you didn't listen. He took a lot of time to talk about it.
What did he say?
One of them said, maybe sometimes you don't understand how he explained. He explained that this is a disease, that the NRM people, they should really detest corruption. He was very emphatic on that.
But Ugandans wanted him to crack the whip or talk about impending action against those that they consider corrupt. But because while 3 NRM MPs have been arraigned in the courts, there are so many more scandals. Even if you left Parliament, there are a number of parastatals and all that where there have been allegations of corruption.
Well, the legal process will take their own course. He mentioned about the don't people will crash. He mentioned that today.
He also mentioned that he does not want to involve himself in the struggles of Parliament and its commissioners.
Fine.
This is in response to allegations about corruption within the House.
The process in Parliament, let Parliament process take its own course. But he was very emphatic on that, on the issue of advising the leaders to detest themselves from corruption.
You think as a president, yes, you can advise, but you're also empowered to act. And I think Ugandans don't doubt President Yoweri Museveni's goodwill when it comes to the fight against corruption. It's the action that they think is half-hearted. One day he's flirting with the corrupt, the next day he's criticizing them.
No, the processes, Kwezi, which have to be followed, and they are followed.
So how come those processes are not an inconvenience when President Yoweri Museveni, for example, wants something from Parliament? He wants a contentious law passed or wants an amendment made?
The question you're talking about is not about Parliament alone. If you see, for instance, one the anti-corruption unit has been following up. There are so many cases they are following up, and a lot of evidence, and the question now is between investigation and prosecution. Some of the things need the improvement in the prosecution, in the investigation, and so forth. But the processes are on.
Well, Ugandans have been waiting for long, because even on the issue of the Karamoja iron sheets, a lot of the cases are still pending. We know some suspects who confessed that indeed these iron sheets were found in their homes and their businesses, their schools and their farms. And up to today, no action has been taken, legal or political.
Well, legal has been taken. There are 3 people who have...
Only a few of them. Certainly, Moses, you and I know that many more prominent people were implicated.
Crazy, don't take me back to the Mabati thing. The country has talked about it for so many years. Today we're about to budget.
It's the reason why the Speaker of the House was sanctioned, Mr. Moses Byaruhanga. Don't you think this is such an important matter for Ugandans? And whenever the opposition has had the opportunity to raise this issue, they've raised it with their supporters, and Ugandans agree that this is a serious matter.
On corruption,
yes.
I think we also have... hello?
Yes, please, go ahead.
We also have a weakness within the political class. Take, for instance, the Mabati case you're raising.
Yes.
Parliament passed a supplementary budget providing 39 billion to purchase Mabati for those
Karachunas.
Now, where were the MPs when the budget was passed and Mabati were procured? Where were the MPs follow up that the budget we passed? Where is the Mabati? Until somebody raises a red flag that the Mabati has found its way in other people's homes, that's when everybody becomes conscious.
Yes.
Where was the political leadership? When you hear about corruption in hospitals and all this, at all those levels, there are political leadership. There is no school which is not in a parish, which parish has a councillor at the sub-county level, which sub-county has a councillor at the district level, which sub-county is in the constituency represented in Parliament. So if the political class followed up all these budgets we are passing, the money we are passing, it becomes much easier to fight corruption.
Moses Byaruhanga, your last word on the show before we sign out.
My last word on the show tonight is that this budget, especially if you look at the fund for getting out of poverty, the PDM fund, the Yoga fund, the funds for under UDB, the Agricultural Credit Scheme fund, the SME fund. If Ugandans borrowed, use this money constructively for the intended purposes, the economy will grow, create jobs, and we'll get more revenue, so that in the next budget, we'll be talking of the target for URA going much higher. Because when people use PDM funds and earn income and use it in consumption, the goods they are consuming will create more tax, will go to the economy. At the same time, more jobs will be created. So that will help the economy grow. All
right, sir. Thank you very much, Moses. You're listening there to Moses Byaruhanga, Senior Presidential Advisor on Political Affairs. And this show, as you well know, is sponsored by Mega Milk. It's been a special edition of the Thursday Hot Seat, focusing on the economy, and today's budget speech by the Minister of Finance, Honorable Matia Kasaija. The theme for the next financial year, 2024-2025, is full monetization of Uganda's economy through commercial agriculture, industrialization, expanding and broadening services, digital transformation, and market access. We remain hopeful that the budget will certainly meet the needs of many of our citizens, and will do our role as the media to critique and criticize government where necessary. I've been Kwezi Tabaro, standing in for Patrick Kamara. Have a good night.
The hottest debate on all relevant topics, live on KFM's Hot Seat Tonight.